Okay, so good morning to everybody. Welcome back. Good night, Shabbos. As we continue our journey through Sefer Likutei, Moharan with Torah Chof. First and foremost, we want to wish a tremendous Mazel Tov to our very dear member of the Chabura, Rebbe Davis, on the birth of a baby girl yesterday. Mazel Tov, Shetizka Legadol, the Torah Lechupel L'Maisim Tovim, Ezras Hashem, and we should share Simchas together as a Chabura. Siyata D'Shmaya, amazing Simcha. This class is sponsored by Yossi Meyer as a schus for Yosef ben Rivka and family, as well as by Zev Klein, nishmas, his parents, Rivka Bryndel, Simcha and Ya'akov and Yeshעיהו, the nishmas should have an aliyah in the schus of our learning together as we continue Torah Chof. So we've been speaking about this entire week. We've been speaking about the journey from the Koach HaMedameh, which Rebbe Nachman renamed the Yitzhahara Koach HaMedameh, the force of illusion, the force of delusion, to rise out of that, out of a less realistic and accurate way of looking at the world, and to rise into Seichel, to allow the Seichel to lead, to allow the horse to be in the van and the human to be driving the van as opposed to the horse leading the wagon, right? And the behema of ourselves, which was the Koach HaMedameh, leading. And the Rebbe told us about the journey that a person needs to travel from the Koach HaMedameh to Seichel b'Koach. So then Seichel is at least theoretically back in the picture in some sense, and a person begins to think about the world. And then Seichel b'Poyal is in a much more active way. A person's really going through that journey, and a person is slowly but surely awakening to the reality that you cannot just live life unconsciously like a robot. Just not going to happen, right? It's nothing. That this is not why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a mind and a heart. That's the goal, is that the Koach HaMedameh should be operated, should be guided, right? That a person should be in control. Slowly but surely, a person begins to take that journey, and then finally a person arrives at what's called Amuna. A person gets to a place of Seichel HaNikneh. Seichel HaNikneh means it's an acquired truth, right? It's not simply that the mind is active. We've arrived at certain clear core principles that become part of the bedrock of our identity, and that doesn't go away. And that's called Seichel HaNikneh. And all of this was really in the Beis HaMikdash, which was the place where we were shechting our behemas, shechting our behamias, koach hadimyan, and we spoke at length that each and every one of us in our own lives is capable also of building the Beis HaMikdash, kol mi sheyesh bo idea ki ilu nivneh Beis HaMikdash b'yamav, and in that sense a person can go from Seichel b'Koach, which is Chochmah, to Seichel b'Poyal, which is Binah, finally to Seichel HaNikneh, which is Das, and that's kol mi sheyesh bo idea ki ilu nivneh Beis HaMikdash b'yamav. Then with the aspect of the Beis HaMikdash you get back Shamir, which was Seichel b'Koach, Neifas Tzufim, Seichel b'Poyal, and then Amana, which is Seichel HaNikneh, the three things that the Gemara inside the Mishnah site that told us were nullified when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. When we rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, we're able to reacquire those things. Then yesterday we started to talk about, or we really talked about, we went through that part of the Torah, about how every single time a person is rising from level to level, it isn't like a person gets out of Dimyan and then into Seichel and then the story's finished. It's a constant process of life. Every person in their own journey is going to go from Madrega to Madrega. As they get to the next Madrega, they're going to have to go through Dimyanis. And we learned very deeply about the way in which passing through the Dimyan is not a b'diavad, it's part and parcel of the process. In order to access the fruit, you have to go through the klipa. You have to go through the vessel. It's normal, right? That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to be, and on the contrary, that's the only way that it can be, right? Because the more that a person is grappling, struggling, faltering, and then forced to recalibrate and redefine, by the time they actually get to that madrig of Kedusha, they're ready for it, and they're able to engage with it in a proper way, in a healthy way, in a stable way, in an accurate way, and in a way that's free of the dimyan with which they have to begin, because mitoch shaloi lishma ba lishma, and then eventually a person gets to the madriga without the baggage, right? And that's sort of the goal. And the Rebbe told us then about this strange chain of Jewish progression, right, which some of us had a little bit of difficulty with, and I'm going to speak about that in a minute, where the Rebbe says that really all of Klal Yisrael is arranged in some kind of, like sort of almost a Seder Shtalshalos, like a chain, like a hierarchical array of all souls within Klal Yisrael, and all of these souls Klape Shmaya, from Hashem's perspective, which is totally unfathomable to us in any way, shape, or form. But Rebbe Nachman is just telling us from Hashem's perspective, Kiviyachal, the whole thing is one huge synchronized spiritual movement. It's one dance. And in some sense, when one neshama has an aliyah, it's because all the neshamas are having an aliyah. When one neshama has a yerida, it's because all of the neshamas are having a yerida. Now, obviously, the details of this process are confounding. What are you talking about? Every person's very complex. People operate on many, many different levels. People are components of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. People have been in Gilgul many, many times. There are neshamas that are in Olam Hazeh, there are neshamas that are in Olam Haba. How does all this work? I don't know, and I have not seen in any of the Sifrei Mefarshim on the Likutei really talk about this. They ask the questions, then they, sort of say, because Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, that's and that was the yesod that we used yesterday to understand this. But ultimately, the mechanisms I don't understand. But the point, the salient point that I tried to bring out to somebody who was asking after Shir yesterday, along this line, is that I think we shouldn't get lost in the technical, sort of theological nature of what it is that Rebbe Nachman is trying to present. I think the main point to focus on is why the Rebbe is bringing out this point, which is that Dimyon exists on every single level. That's really what the Rebbe means to bring out over here, and for us to recognize that in our own hyper-subjective experience, which this meta-structure doesn't negate, because this is from Hashem's perspective. From our perspective, life is as complex. This changes nothing, and that's what I wanted to respond. Right? This changes nothing from our lived experience of subjectivity. This is a meta system which somehow accounts for all of the subjectivity and all of the ma'adas of every single person without denigrating anyone, and sees Klal Yisrael as a unified, totally homogeneous whole. Klap Ishmaya. Right? So what does that mean? Now I'm like some sort of rope, like I feel like a marionette. I feel like I'm being pulled by someone else. And no, the answer is you continue with your avodah. Nothing changes. This is not talking about Bechira. This is talking about Yediyah. Right, so the Chaver that have been with us from the beginning, this has been a theme that we've been going right from the beginning. The synthesis between Yediyah and Bechira. There was even a Torah, I believe it was Torah Chof Aleph, where Rebbe Nachman actually spoke out, the words Yediyah Bechira as a paradox, right, about something, that we're addressing. But it goes all the way back to Torah Beis, right? Where it certainly goes to Torah Vav. We were speaking in Torah Beis, if you remember, about the importance of being Koilea L'Sar V'Lo Yachte. When a person is davening, it shouldn't be too much to the right, which we said is the Binah of Yediyah, where a person says, well, what do I need to daven for? Because Hashem is everything. And it shouldn't be too much to the left, which is Bechira, where a person says, not only, is it important to daven, it's my davening that's making it happen. That's too much Bechira. And so that's what we learned about Yediyah, Bechira, and the synthesis between them. This Hasaga is, and the Svarim make this clear, is a Hasaga of Yediyah. It's not Bechira. Right? This is a Hasaga from Hashem's way of looking at the world, which we cannot fathom. Right? In our experience, we have our own bechira, we have our own complexities. It's not linear where we experience aliyah after aliyah after aliyah. We're talking about klape shmaya. Klape shmaya, the question about what do you mean? Some people have a yerida. We're arguing that klape shmaya, no, it's just another level of dimyon before they get to the next aliyah. It doesn't look that way. It looks like some people were in aliyah and then left and then never come back. We don't know the system of Gulgulim. So this is the kind of thing where it's just impenetrable to us. It's unfathomable. Rebbe Nachman is giving us a little bit of a taste of he's always doing this, of reality from Hashem's perspective, which exists as a makif, mati v'loy mati, where we reach it, we don't reach it, we understand it a little bit, what we can understand from it, we don't quite understand it, and that's sort of the approach that I take to explaining the mechanisms or the mechanics of this, is by not attempting to explain them, to say this is from Hashem's perspective, in our lives, nothing changes. All the complexity, all the challenge, all the difficulty. I will say, though, in response to a comment about the difficulty of perceiving Knesset Yisrael as a hierarchy, where some neshamas are higher and some neshamas are lower, which would, in a certain sense, would seem like what kind of presentation is that? So first of all, in this presentation of the context, of the concept, we didn't use higher or lower per se. We use Pnimi and Chitzayni, which might not on the surface sound any better. Some neshamas are more Pnimi, some are more Chitzayni, Meichetezi. But for that, I'll point you to Parak Beis and Tanya, where the Baal Tanya makes it extremely clear already from Kadmainim. This is not a new concept that Rebbe Nachman is being mechadish. It's not even a concept in Hasidus. It's a concept in Kabbalah. It's a core concept where we said already, we mentioned it in passing yesterday, Ki ish echad b'leiv echad, that all of Klal Yisrael is arranged like a human, and the human, behechrich, has different parts of the body. Some are closer to the head, some are closer to the feet. We are called ikvus of the Meshicha because we are the parts of atachtain, shabatachtain of the structure. At the same time, eishes chaya la teres bala, even ma'asu aboinim, haisel resh Binah, in some sense, the lower, the higher. Again, so we're not talking absolutes. We're not saying, this is resolutely better, this is worse. The whole system is necessary. And if the whole system is necessary, then what does it make a difference if a person is doing an incredibly important mission for the king, or a person is making sure the king has a toothbrush so that it can go out in public, with a breath that doesn't send everybody scurrying and running away. Both are important. So one is important, one is less important. They're both working for the king. And this is the message. This is the kind of consciousness of realizing that, it is true. There is a structure. There are Gedulas Yisrael who are higher up, but it doesn't mean they're better. Right? But they could be higher. You're allowed to say, even in Hasidus, they could be high. The Tanya says that explicitly. So the Tanya says that there are members of Klal Yisrael that are in the rosh. There are members of Klal Yisrael that are in the arms. There are members of Klal Yisrael that are in the toenail of the toenail. That is a reality. But it doesn't mean that one is better or worse. They're all necessary. And you can have the greatest brain in the world, but if you're missing toenails, it's going to be a difficult life. So this is the way that it works. And this should hopefully clarify a little bit what we were speaking about yesterday. At the very end of the shir, we mentioned that Rebbe Nachman had a conception of those who are higher up in that hierarchy, again, not better or worse, but those who are in a stage of avodah where they've progressed. It's possible that their eating and drinking, which is an avodah chitzonius, is in some sense higher, in some senses more pure or more illuminated or more God-conscious than even the overtly spiritual acts of those who are on the madriga below them. That's the inyan of Panemius, right? And so the Panemius of the lower world is lower than the Chitzonius of the higher world. And this is the way that it goes, Tamid Kacha. And each time that a person rises from Madrega to Madrega, like we mentioned, they will need to cleanse that makom anew. And this Rebbe Nachman put into a pasuk we learned at the very end of yesterday's shir. It's a pasuk of Yirmiyahu, Perek Yud Zayin, Kisei kavod moraim mirishan mikay mikdashenu. Said the Rebbe, Kisei is the aspect of Panemius, because Kisei comes from the word iskasia. Iskasia means something that is hidden right before Eis Daled on page Lamed Ches. Okay, so Kisei is the aspect of Iskasia, is a reference to the hidden Avodah. It's a higher Madrega. That's the Indian of Avodah Pnimis. Kavod is always a reference to that which is revealed, like a garment is called Mechabdusei. It's that which honors a person. You know what a person does for a living, oftentimes based on the clothes that they wear. It's an external manifestation of what was previously internalized. And this is the aspect of kavod, is avodah chitzaynis. So kisei kavod refers to the journey from kavod to kisei, from transforming kavod into kisei kavod. Right? When a person takes over kavod, which is the avodah chitzaynis, by rising up into avodah pnimis of kisei, says the Rebbe, moraim merishan. If you're rising in that journey from kavod to kisei, moraim merishan, you're going higher than you were before. That's how he reads it. So then mekayim miktashenu. Then miktashenu is sanctification of that makom. You're going to need to cleanse that place again from Kelipos, even though that journey has already been taken by somebody else in some sense, again, not in your own way, because every one of us is absolutely unique. Every person has a different fingerprint, etc., etc. This doesn't take away from that at all. In some sense, someone has already grappled with this klipa, not in the same way that you will, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be alive, right? But Hashem needs every person, because every person is an absolutely unique conjugation of different spiritual energies, and they need to do their mission, whether they're part of the Rosh B'nai Yisrael, whether they're part of the Ikvayim of B'nai Yisrael. It doesn't matter. They're needed. We're all needed. There's no question about that. However, in some sense, this realm has already been grappled with by somebody else who vanquished the Kelipos and rose to the next level, Moraim Merishay, right, moving from Kavod to Kisei, but it doesn't matter. If a person is taking that journey on their own, Mekayim Miktashenu, they need to clarify and to cleanse that particular position again as they rise from Medama to Seichel and higher and more authentic and honest and clear and humble and just and with Emunah, that's the ultimate thing of knowing what a person's priorities are and what's important and what's really not important and what a person wants and what they really don't want and what they need and what they really don't need, and all of that going back to the beginning of the week where we spent 3 shiurim speaking about that dynamic at great depth and great length. Let's continue. B'siyata d'shmaya ois dalid. It says the Heilige Tzaddik Schusya Geulah V'al Kol Yisrael Amen. V'yefshel la'achnia klipos. Hainu ademyonis v'amachshavos v'atayvos v'abulbulim v'amanias shemamadrega. Says the Rebbe, it is impossible to subjugate those klipos that a person's going to encounter, which are the dimyonis and all the confusing, bewildering machshavos and the taivos, the reawakened desire of the lower self, v'abulbulim and the confusions, v'amanias and obstacles shebamadrega that are at that madrega. There's only one way. Ela al yidei Gedulas HaBorei. The way to be able to overcome those klipos is by imprinting within our heart and mind in that moment the greatness of the Creator, kamuva b'kavanas, shalahoidel Hashem kiru b'shmoi. As is brought in the kavanas, in the Kisvei Arizal and Shar Kavanas, about Tfilas Shacharis, when a person is rising out of Birchas HaShachar into the next phase of davening, which we've spoken about in the context of Torah, Chav Dalid, which is exactly why Torah Chav Hey immediately follows Chav Dalid, because Chav Dalid, like Rabbi Yehuda pointed out, is moving Aliyas HaOlamos, is going from level to level. That's exactly right. And we spoke about the necessity for Simcha, right, as a person rises from Madrega to Madrega, which we're going to get back to over here in Ice Hay. So it's very, very connected. This is a confirmation of my thesis that the whole Likutei flows. It's not random. There is a link between each and every one of the lessons, which we've been trying to identify all the way through in the Stream of Consciousness document. So the Arizal explains that as you move from Asiya, which is the realm of Birchas HaShachar, into Psuka de Zimra, which is the world of Yitzira, so then there's going to be klipos that awaken themselves, like we learned. So Rebbe Nachman explains, based on Arizal, Shazah Mizbar Niskan, the reason why we say Haidel Hashem Kir B'Shaydiu Ba'amim Alilais of Shirulai Zamrulai Sicha B'Chan B'Lai. So the reason why we're so, proclaiming the greatness of Hashem and speaking about singing His praise in front of all the nations of the world, the ultimate reference to the greatest revelation of Hashem's glory, was Niskan Lahachnia HaKlipa Shebi Yitzira. Was in order to subjugate those klipos that stand at the outset, at the threshold of the Olam HaYitzira, Kinis Ayrim Neged Asiya Sha'olam HaYitzira. Because when the elements of Asiya, like we had learned in Torah Chav Dalid, move from Malchus to Netzach Hod Yisod, and then from Netzach Hod Yisod move up to Chochmah, to Chesed Gevur Tiferes, and then from Chesed Gevur Tiferes into Chochmah Binah, and then from there it tries to move up into the Olam HaYitzira. There's going to be klipos that are going to emerge. So what are you going to do? How are you going to get rid of the klipos? Haidul Hashem. This is why Nusach Svarad, obviously Haidul Hashem comes even before Baruch Shamar, but famously the Chassam Sofer says the only reason that the Arizal wrote those kavanas that he did the way he did is because he davened Nusach Svarad. But he said if the Arizal would have davened Nusach Ashkenaz, he would have found kavanas for Nusach Ashkenaz. Like the Chassam Sofer says, there's no Kabbalistic, just because we only have kavanas Ari on Nusach Svarad, it doesn't mean that that's the only tikkunim. There are tikkunim that are made, Nusach Ashkenaz, maybe they have, I don't know exactly, but whatever. They don't need, maybe, in a certain sense, to be machnia the klipa that strongly, maybe Baruch Sha'amar, whatever it is. But for in Kisvei Arizal, this is the position of Haidu LaHashem Kiru B'Shmai. Shezeh Mizvar Niskan LaHachnia Klipa Shebiyitzira Kinis Ayrim Neged Asiya Sha'olam B'Yitzira. As the world of Asiya, which is the world of Birchas HaShachar, begins to move into the world of Psuka de Zimra, klipos are going to arise. How do you subjugate them? Gedulas HaBorei. Haidul Hashem. You have to, and again, this goes back to what we said yesterday. People have a misconception of what klipos are. And like I said, it's a lack of emunah to believe in klipos, but to believe in them in the wrong way. Because if we believe in them in the wrong way, it's like there's a real force. It's called a klipa. And there's Hashem, and then there's the klipa. And it's like, no, the Baal Shem Tov is coming to tell you, the klipa is Hashem. The klipas vait are part and parcel of the journey. That there is no aliyah and yerida in an ultimate sense. The yerida is part and parcel of the aliyah haba, right? Or there's work to do in the yerida. That's Rebbe Nachman's big yesod in the Torah and Elul, which is Torah Vav, about baki b'ratzei, baki b'shayv. You have to be a baki there, and if you're a baki there, then there's no discouragement. You know, it is what it is. It is what it is. You know, and not only it is what it is in a negative sense, it's beautiful, and it's just as beautiful than if a person was in perfect health, sitting in a beis medrash, Gan Eden. Then when a person has stuff that come up relating to their Gashmias life, where the knee-jerk reaction is to say, what a shame, you know, I could be davening, I could be learning, and it's, you know, I have to run out. I think I gave the mashal then, if I'm not mistaken, of Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter. It was a very difficult family situation, a lot of tragedies. His wife went really major psychological issues that made him totally miserable, and he refused to divorce her because he said, this is what Hashem gave me, this is my lot, you know, I accept the ba'ava. He had a child with severe special needs, and at the same time, he's a tremendous manhig, was and is. I mean, now he's very old, he's in his 90s, but the whole way through, he was a manhig, a mashpia, and he was the Baal Tekeya at the main minyan of Breslov Hasidim in Yerushalayim, before they were going to Uman. Maybe when it was still very dangerous, they had the kibbutz in the Beis Medrash in Yerushalayim. And I can't remember if I read this story, if my father told me the story, but there's one year, and forgive me, I do remember saying this in some context in these shiurim, just repeating, the Chazara, where he got up, and it's apropos for Rosh Hashanah, with all the kavanas of everything, standing up to blow the shofar, and he's preparing, and he's getting the shofar positioned with all the kavanas neiros, and everybody's waiting, and it's pitch silent, you know, it's the moment. And somebody came and tapped Rabbi Yaakov Meir on the shoulder, and he turns around in surprise. And somebody told him, he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but you know, he had a special needs child. He soiled himself, and he's spreading it all over the walls of the shul. You know, making everything soiled and dirty. And like, who's going to look after him? There's nobody. Didn't have a mom. You know, and Rabbi Yaakov Meir is the guardian. Like, Rabbi Yaakov Meir with a smile puts down the shofar. And he arranges that somebody else should blow, and he goes and he takes care of his child with a smile. Because Rav Yaakov Meir Shechter, meaning to a Breslover, meaning to a person with a leiv basar, meaning to a person whose emunah is the way that it's supposed to be, there's no difference between blowing shofar for hundreds of people with kavanas arizal and wiping your kids, you know, off the wall. There is no difference. Because in Breslov, it's not about me. It's not about us, the Oved. It's about the one we're serving and what he needs from me in this moment. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, what the king needs. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's my job to go again and arrange, you know, peace treaties between different kingdoms as a diplomat, or it's my job to buy a new washing machine for the palace. Doesn't matter. Because it was never about the individual, it was about the one that we're serving, and each person has their own mission, and therefore it humbles the people who think that they have big jobs, and it empowers the people who think they have little jobs, because it turns out that there is no big and there is no little. There's just avodas Hashem, and there's l'sakin oila b'malchus shakai, and there's b'yemahu yi Hashem echad u'shmai echad, and that's the ultimate goal, and that's baki b'ratzai, baki b'shayv. How did I get into baki b'ratzai, baki b'shayv?
Speaking about the Kelipos at the new level.
Shkayach, thank you. So the Kelipos are mamish. It's the same. Thank you so much. Save my life. The Kelipos is Hashem. There's no difference between a person who's in seichel and everything's cleared, everything's great, and a person who's in shas yirida. There's no difference on an emotional level. Malihacha, malihasam. What does it matter whether I'm here? What does it matter whether I'm there? We've said this in the past from the Ma'arinayim on the pasuk with which Shulchan Aruch begins. The paramount halacha shebachol halachas is shivisi Hashem lenegdi samid. Says the Ma'arinayim, shivisi Hashem lenegdi. So on a simple level, it means I've placed God before me always. Says the Ma'arinayim, and it's very, very powerful. I believe it comes from the Baal Shem Tov, but I saw it in the Ma'arinayim. Yud Ke Vav Ke is the midah of chesed always. Negdi could mean I have placed Yud Ke Vav Ke next to me, in front of me, But negdi is oppositional. Ezer kenegdoi, right? Neged means that which opposes. Says the Moharan, David HaMelech is saying, I've reached a level in my emunah that shivisi Hashem le negdi tamid. Yud Ke Vav Ke, which is the chesed of Hashem, and negdi, those things that seem to be oppositional to what I want, shivisi. It's the same to me. Tamid. Doesn't matter what's happening in my life. Shivisi Hashem le negdi. Whether it's Yud Ke Vav Ke, it's beautiful. Whether it's negdi, it's also beautiful. Because this is part and parcel of the Ratzon Hashem. The only consideration is how that might impact other people. And that's something a person has to daven about, and that whatever, you know. But in a person's own life, it doesn't matter. Because this is what Hashem wants. So klape, the person himself, this is absolutely fine. I am a Kabbalit 100% ba'ava. And again, it's not, I want to clarify, it's not that I'm a Kabbal something bad ba'ava. It's the realization that there's nothing bad. Ein davara. There's nothing bad. Nothing. It is part and parcel of an unfolding tikkun. Bein befrat, bein bechlal. It's part of a journey. And a person is able to anchor themselves in that reality. Chas v'shalom, not negating the human emotions that come along with mourning, that come along with sadness. That's very important. This doesn't negate that. But if a person's anchored in this das, which we've been learning about the whole entire time that we've been learning Likutei Moharan, then there's an island of stillness. And there isn't a fundamental sense of despair. And that's why Rebbe Nachman is able uniquely, because this was the thing he focused on the most, to declare to the world that Ein Shem Yish B'Olam Klal. Yish there isn't. It might be frustrated, it might be annoying, it might be you have to think about it and daven about it, but there's no Yish. There's no sense of like, okay, forget it, Fafalin, the whole thing's over. Nothing's over. This is part of the journey. The Kelipos is part and parcel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, and maybe this is what it means, Gedulas HaBorei. It is specifically when a person encounters something that appears oppositional to their service of Hashem, that a person in that moment needs an infusion of Gedulas HaBorei, that Hashem is so big and so great that He's in the Klipa too. We're going to learn about that in Tarkov Tetzvav Be'ezras Hashem, Haba Aleinu, when we get there. Rebbe Nachman says this explicitly. The Rebbe says over there very briefly that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is an Oyev Tzedakah Mishpat. We say that every morning in davening, and 3 times a day. As well as an Oyev Yisrael. We say that also in davening. So it's Oyev Ame Yisrael, but Hashem is also Oyev Tzedakah Mishpat. So Rebbe Nachman says, so then what does Hashem do when a Jew wants to get close to Him, but Midas Hadin says the person's not Ra'ui? Hashem loves both. Hashem loves the Jew, but Hashem also loves Mishpat. Says Rebbe Nachman, no problem. We know from the Zohar Kadosh, says Rebbe Nachman, that Hashem's love for the Jew overrides His love for Mishpat. He loves Mishpat, but He loves Jews more. But He loves Mishpat. So you can't negate that. So he says, you know what the cheshbon is? Hashem puts the obstacle, but Hashem puts Himself in the obstacle. Meaning, because you're ostensibly trying to get to Hashem, and then, there's this maniya in the way. I gotta get the maniya out of the way and then get to Hashem. But Hashem puts the maniya, and then He infuses His spirit in the maniya. So then that which would seem to be preventing you from getting to Hashem is actually part and parcel of Hashem. Which means, in a practical sense, that the obstacles themselves are stepping stones in order to enable you to then rise in a way that you couldn't have risen before. This is called Yerida Tzarech Aliyah. This is called the radical monotheism of the Baal Shem Tov, where there is nothing and no place and no circumstance and no experience where Hashem is vacant. Which is vacant of Hashem, where Hashem is absent. None. None. Malay chal haaretz kivaydai. And the only reason that Amalek needs to be wiped off the face of the planet, whatever Amalek is, now Amalek is an embodied force. Or Hashem, we don't, we're not a genocidal nation. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they are. It's an internal thing. It's an evolution of Yiddishkeit. I believe that's Ratzon Hashem. We don't know. There's no people that we're not. It's inside. It's inside. So what is it? And why? So you're telling me Hashem is in everything. So why Amalek you wipe out? Because Amalek is the force in the world that tries to pretend that Hashem is not in everything. That's what Amalek is. Meaning Amalek is the force of despair. We mentioned this previously in Shirim. All the midas can be elevated except the midah of despair. Because what are you going to elevate? It's the midah that undermines the purpose of elevation. Because it says there's no point. So it is the only midah that cannot be elevated. It is embodied in Amalek. And although, one second, there's halas, hamidas everywhere else, Amalek cannot be elevated. All the other nations of the world correspond to a different midah. They'll all have their elevation in the end of days. I'll tell you a secret. The Rav Kook writes that even Amalek will have its tikkun in the end. Okay. So Rav Kook was like the radical, positive theologian in the way of the Baal Shem and his students. But despair is the only thing that's hopeless. The only thing that should give up hope is giving up hope. Everywhere else, Sakadosh Baruch Hu. Shivisi Hashem l'nai disamid. Hashem is in the mania. Hashem is in the obstacle. Which means to say that the thing that looked like it was preventing me is actually, because there's no such thing. Rebbe Nachman goes so far as to say, Ein shem mania ba'olam klal. And it correlates to his declaration, Ein shem yish ba'olam klal. And elsewhere he says, Ein shem chayma ba'olam klal. And he says elsewhere, Ein shem teva ba'olam klal. And then Rebbe Nachman in Likutei Halachos writes, Ein shem olam ba'olam klal. There's no world, nothing. This is part of the emunah that Rebbe Nachman is trying to bring us into. This is it's a different thing than learning Yudgim Amidus, whatever the animamins. It's a consciousness. It takes a long time for and being flooded with these teachings, flooded with them, to be able to begin to onboard these hasagas in a way that they go from seichel kayach to seichel b'payal and then seichel nikna. And when they become seichel nikna, you're a different human being. You're an absolutely different human being, one and then two, yeah.
Sorry to bring yesterday on the chat. Somebody brought the Malbim's definition of the Nachash, and looking it up, it seems to define the Nachash as exactly that, as in itself, almost believing that there is no such a thing outside of itself, outside of Ein Elokus. So it's like the prototype of absence.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost as a idea of absence.
Yes, Bidiyuk.
And the way he describes it is just extraordinary. So
okay, yeah, we'll take a look at that. That's absolutely correct. I'll tell you the Maharal, commenting on the Gemara in avodas that says, no, it's in Soita that says that the Yitzhar is all eyes. All eyes. Right, which correlates to many people's mystical visions. There's a lot of beings that have eyes all over them. So this is a universal, a cross-cultural concept of the devil that has eyes. And the Maharal explains what does it mean eyes. So the Maharal says that the eyes are a vacuum. The eyes take everything that's outside the person and brings them into the person. So he says the Yitzhahar, the Satan, is all eyes. Meaning its whole job is to suck you into nowhere. He says it's all eyes. There's nothing else but the eyes. So where is it bringing you? Into absence. Because there's nothing else other than the eye. We have a brain behind the eyes. It takes the world in and you can process. The Yitzhar is just eyes. Its whole job is just to suck you into like a black hole, into the void. But that's what the Nachash is. The Nachash is aniva afsi oid. It is me and nothing else. And in the side of Kedusha and Muna, which counteracts the Nachash Gematria Mashiach, right? So the consciousness of Mashiach that counteracts the Nachash is not just ani ve'oid, right? Not ani ve'avsi oid. It's me and there are others. It's ein oid milvadai. It's the exact opposite. It's the consciousness that there is nothing but Hashem. Not eating and drinking, not sleeping, not relationships, not work, business, not any aspect of life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the tragic, and the devastating, and nothing. exists that isn't saturated with the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, which at once is infinitely loving, infinitely guiding the world toward tikkun, infinitely guiding the world toward ashrecha ba'olam hazeh v'tov lech le'olam haba, even if our minds can't grasp it at this particular moment in time. Okay, so let's go weiter. Upnimius asiya olam malbish ki nisarim neged asiya sheba olam b'yitzira va'yidei shemaskirin Gedulas HaBorei, because that's the way that we're going to counteract the appearance of the klipa. Nechnaim ayin sham ki pnimius hayitzira oila lebriya upnimius asiya oila umalbish l'chitzonius yitzira, because it says over there in the Kisvei Ari that the pnimius of yitzira at that moment is rising up to bria to get us ready for birchas Kriya Shema, right? And at the same time, that draws up the pnimius of asiya that rises to yitzira. Sounds familiar? Of course it does, because that's what we learned about the nishmas, right? And this is how it goes. Rebbe Nachman said the same thing in Torah Chof Dalid, that the same applies for the olamais, right? Which we learned there. And so it's the same exact mechanism. Over here we're speaking about it on the level of avodah. So what does that practically mean, though? A person should walk around their whole life screaming out Geulah Hashem Kir B'Shmai. It might not be a bad thing, but it says the Rebbe, how do you do that? How does one activate Gedulas HaBorei when we're trying to move from Dimyan to Seichel? Says the Rebbe, there's one way. V'ha'eskalos Gedulas HaBorei ho'ayidei Tzedakah shenoisnim la'ani hagun. Says the Rebbe, a phenomenal thing, and a like whoa. At a left field, but at Kedarka B'Kardesh, the way along the journey from Dimyan into Seichel, from Behema into Adam, to enable a person to overcome the Kelipos and to break past it, is by giving tzedakah to people that are hagun, right? To people that are deserving and legit, and not scammers who join WhatsApp groups and call everybody pretending to be somebody from Texas who needs $300 for his, to buy his house or something. No, la'ani hagun, to a real ani. Giving tzedakah to an ani hagun can help a person get out of dimyan and into seichel. Ma kesher. And we'll say it on two levels. Level number one is that Rebbe Nachman explicitly says this. You could turn to, if you don't mind, turn to the second volume, to Torah Beis. To Torah Beis. No, we almost never do this, but just to see this inside is important. Take a look at Torah Beis in Tinyana. It's Eis Gimel in the second volume. And take a look at the very bottom of the first column. Torah Beis in the second volume of Likutei Tinyana. And the Rebbe says over there, Ki yesh dibor shel tzedakah. There's an aspect of dibor of tzedakah. B'chinas medaber b'tzedakah. The pasuk Yeshayahu says to speak with charity. Shezeo b'chinas hayisrin sheyesh la'adam al hachai. This is the aspect of that which distinguishes between an animal and a person. Shu dibor, shu Geder Adam. Speech. Speech is what distinguishes between animals and humans, even though animals certainly can communicate, sometimes even in a complex way, not nearly as complex as humans can communicate, right? So yes, animals have communication, whales and different calls of birds and different animals and so on. But the human can articulate, the human can speak in a complex and sophisticated way. V'hu b'chinas tzedakah. Says the Rebbe, this is the aspect of tzedakah. Medaber b'tzedakah. Tzedakah is also an aspect of that which distinguishes between animals and humans. Shehu goymal chesed im habriyos. Because the human being is able to put other people first. And not only for the fortification of the tribe, right? Where by animals you can also see self-sacrifice for the purpose of fortifying the whole. No, not for any cheshbet. Like zero. Chesed shel emes. Like for no reason other than there's a concept of charity. It's a concept of kindness. Shezeh Geder Adam, shedarkoi ligmal chesed ma she'en kein hachai. And again, he throws in shedarkoi ligmal chesed, even though you can find by animals some kind of concept of rachmanas and whatever. It's not the derech. The derech of animals, turn back to our Torah, is reactivity. Reactivity puts the person first. Doesn't stop to think about what other considerations there might be. Reaction means I'm feeling A, I'm going to do B. There's no space between the stimulus and the reaction. Memela, if tzedakah, Rebbe Nachman tells us, is Geder Adam, and what we're trying to do now is move from dimyon, which is the aspect of behema, into seichel, which is the aspect of Adam. So then when a person goes ahead and gives tzedakah, this activates that whole koima, right? That whole Gedulas HaBorei, which means Tzelem Elokem, right? Our godless of what it can mean to be a human, because we are Tzelem Elokem. What is Tzelem Elokem? Well, what do we know about Hashem? Olam Chesed Binah. Hashem is the ultimate giver. This, that God created a world and sustains all of us, is only because Hashem is giving tzedakah. It's not a selfish thing. Hashem is doing it for us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing it for reasons that are unfathomable to us, ultimately. But we're the ones who benefit. Teva toiv lehetiv. So Gedulas HaBorei is Tzelem Elokem. Tzelem Elokem is a human being. Human being is seichel. So as I rise from dimyon into seichel and meet with Kelipos, which is the dimyonis, how do I get out of dimyon into seichel of the next madrega? The answer is giving tzedakah. Because giving tzedakah will activate the Geder Adam, which is Gedulas HaBorei, akin to Haidel Hashem Kir B'Shmeidim Amaloisav, which is the aspect of seichel, getting out of Bahamius and into the Geder Adam of what it means to be a human being. This is one madrega. The other madrega, like we said before, the form of the Kelipos, very beautifully, is the inyan of the nachash, which is ani va'afsi oid. He tells Adam and Chava, don't think of us. There's no other considerations. God, what God? It's you. You eat it from the tree, and it'll be you. You won't need anybody else. He only became God because he ate from this tree. That kind of way of thinking, which is a fostering of the ego, a fostering of volition, of a person's own sense of agency, which can be a wonderful thing, but it could also be a miserable thing if the person doesn't use the agency for the purpose of that which is beyond them. So then, it's only logical that the way to transcend that impulse is by actually going ahead and self-transcending. So it isn't just that seichel is Adam, and Adam is Tzelem Elokem, and therefore Gedulas HaBorei, which is embodied in tzedakah, is going to help us get there. That's one level. But another level, which I think is simpler and just more straightforward, is that the greatest dimyon is to think that I need my money for me. That's the greatest dimyon in the world. To think that the reason I have money is for me. The greatest seichel in the world is to be on the level where a person sees the money as need for my expenses, be responsible, but ultimately can give it away. Be'emunah. Yeah, going back to exactly be'emunah. That goes back to Torah, I believe it was Yutes. Absolutely. It's to give to someone else. That's the greatest seichel in the world, because the greatest dimyon in the world is gaiva. The greatest dimyon in the world. The craziest dimyon. Rebbe Nachman says, Misha writes a kavod shaita. Rebbe Nachman says, whoever wants kavod is a fool. It's like an ant who's marching around with some kind of royal thing. It's an ant. Shaita. Shtus. The hepech of emunah. No, nothing. There's just mission. There's just trying to progress and proceed, which we learned about in Torah Vav, for the sake laharbes b'chvod hamakom. Memayit b'chvod atzmai, laharbes b'chvod hamakom. Likutei is a parts of Shalem. All the teachings all interconnect to try to give us a consciousness that really can't be summed up in words. The only word you can use for it is emunah, but emunah is a caricatured emunah, because everybody uses the word emunah. We mean emunah amitis. We mean seichel nikne emunah, not seichel koyach emunah, not even seichel poyel emunah. We're talking about where a person changes. Rebbe Nachman said, take my hand and I'll lead you on a path that's new. And he says, if you follow my eitzes, you could become a tzaddik kamoini mamish. Rebbe Nachman wasn't interested in being a Rebbe with Hasidim. Rebbe Nachman wanted to be a Rebbe where everybody was a Rebbe. He wanted, meaning not Rebbe, a tzaddik. He wanted his people to be tzaddikim. He really wasn't just, he was servicing them by giving nice lectures. He wanted them to change. He wanted them to have a leiv basar and to get out of the leiv even, which Rashi told us, we've said now a number of times, means gaiva. So how do you get out of gaiva? By giving to someone else. Now the klipa is that giving to someone else can oftentimes become the greatest dimion of a person's covet, because now their name is on a building, and again, I can't knock it because I don't have that nisayon, and I'm sure if I had it, I'd have it. But it can become the biggest dimion, but that's just zelu mazeh. And the reason that it's possible in giving tzedakah that should become the vessel or the platform for the greatest gaiva is because, who are you kidding? On the contrary, tzedakah is supposed to be the absolute opposite of that, which is why to those who know, there's no greater shtus than a person being mispa'er over this, that he gave someone else money that was never his in the first place, and oftentimes is inherited, so it's not even his to have made. And they feel all proud because they say, what are you proud about? It wasn't yours. It was nothing you did. And it's like, there's nothing let. There's nothing. Okay, whatever. Meaning, in other words, it's if a person doesn't have a lot of money and still gives the little bit that they can, it's much more impressive. But again, every person has the nisayon on their own level. But it's the greatest shtus, because gaiva is a shtus. And tzedakah is supposed to bring a person into Geder Adam. Geder Adam, paradoxically, is that although we're greater than animals, our greatness is that Adam ubehema toishia Hashem, says the Gemara. This is bnei Adam sha'arum b'das, who are wise, umesimem atzmam kebehema. And they use their intellect, agency, bechira, to nullify themselves. That's the greatness of humans. Adam ubehema. When an Adam then goes ahead and embodies the animalistic traits of simplicity, which are really praiseworthy, Toshia Hashem, then a person's been saved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the ultimate goal. And so this is a little bit what we're speaking about when we say, Al Yidei Tzedakah Shenoisnim La'ani Hagun. That does it. That does it. That's the Gedulas Hashem, because our greatness is in that we can humble ourselves. That is our greatness. That's the greatness of Klal Yisrael. Loi meirubchem chashuk Hashem b'chem, the pasuk says. Hashem did not choose us because we're great. Ki atem ha'ma'at mikol ha'amim say Chazal mam'itim es atzmechem. The same lashon. That's our greatness. That's the greatness of humanity as a whole. Adam ubehema teshi Hashem. That's the greatness of Am Yisrael befrat. That we are supposed to be the quintessential Adam. We're supposed to be the Tzelem Elokem. Not the Tzelem Elokem. We're supposed to be the Mamleches Kohanim. That we're modeling for everyone else what it means to really be a human. And human doesn't mean Ezu Gibar. Not Kohevish is Yitzray. Who gets covered? Person who runs away from covered. This is what we're supposed to be modeling. This is what Emunah means of Ein Oid Mavade, Shivisi Hashem L'Nagdi Samid, Gedulas HaBorei, Haidul Hashem Kir B'Shmai Haidiu, Ba'amim Ali Loisaf. This is the Gedulah that we're supposed to show the nations. Ki atem itim ez atzmachem. Loi mi ribchem chashik Hashem achem. To show the human being, you want to be great, you want to manifest Gedulas HaBorei Tzelem Elokem, give tzedakah to somebody humbly. And realize that whatever you have is for someone else. Realize that to live in this world means to give. To live in this world means to recognize I have life for the purpose of benefiting everyone around me. That is what it means to be alive. And in so doing, I am imitating HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'alachta b'drachav, because that is what it means to be God, is to give. Olam chesed yibaneh. This is what's going to enable us to take the journey from Dimyan, Behema, into Seichel, Adam, and to grapple with the Kelipos that on the outside look like it's an independent force, which is going to cause me to think independently like a Nachash, and then cause me to think that Aniva Afsi Oid, because here I am, and here because I encountered a place where God isn't. And Rebbe Nachman comes to say, no, Ein Oid Milvadai. Ein Oid Milvadai. The Kelipos, you need to say Gedulas HaBorei. The Kelipos full, the Manias full of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. And in that sense, to use that as an opportunity to fortify one's emunah, and in that moment, to do this eitzah of tzedakah la'ani hagun, to enable a person to transcend and to move from level to level. But as Hashem, I know we're doing very little bits at a time, but it's a very deep and very fundamental Torah, and so we're going into it deeply. But as Hashem, next week we'll pick up as Rebbe Nachman unfolds this concept and explains what happens to Jewish money and why it is that Jewish money shines in a certain way. It's a big sugya. We're going to get into that, Be'ezus Hashem, next week, Monday morning. V'siyata d'shmaya. Thank you for a phenomenal week. It's been incredible jumping back in. A few people have commented like something, it's next level, and I feel the same. Really, Torah Chof is it's perfect for Elul. It's perfect for, because it really does correlate to the main themes of Torah Vav, which is of course the Elul Torah. Kedai to review if you go back and have some time to read it through. And Hashem should help us, that we should all continue to be successful in this journey as we rise from Dimyan into Seichel, and to embody the Gedulas HaBorei of the Tzelem Elokem. B'siyata d'shmaya, wishing everybody a wonderful Shabbos up ahead.
Maybe that's why it says Chochmah, because you have to give with Seichel and not with Dimyan.
All right, otherwise it's still Dimyan. Beautiful. 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 Thank you. Thank you for joining.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני